Well, good evening, and thank you for attending our public forum on our North Kingstown School Department School Facility Projects and School Bond. I'm Kenny Duver, I'm the superintendent here for North Kingstown. First, we'll just introduce, I'll ask each member up here at the table to introduce themselves and their role. Just so everyone does know, we have members from School Department and Perkins Eastman, as well as Jacobs here tonight for the presentation and the Q&A. And we also have members of our school committee and town council as well that are here, so thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Great to see everyone here. My name is Ralph Mollis. I'm the town manager and also co-chair of the building subcommittee. I'll be here to assist Dr. Duver and others in answering any questions and also spend some time on the financial slides and hopefully answer any questions that you may have on the financial aspect of the bond proposal.
Hi, Rob Mezzanotte. I'm the assistant superintendent. Great to be here. Thank you.
Chris Murphy. I am the Director of Facilities and Safety for the school district and a member of the building committee as well.
Good evening. My name is Inga Knox. I'm the owner's project manager with Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Mark McCarthy. I'm principal in charge from Perkins Eastman Architects.
Hello, I'm Tina Greco. I'm with Perkins Eastman and I'm the project manager. And happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to provide an overview for tonight for the presentation, the facility projects that we have outlined and proposed for the district covers the entire district. We are looking at renovations at all of our buildings, as well as building a brand new Wickford Middle School for the town. It is the vision of the district to keep 2 middle schools that are both centrally located throughout North Kingstown. We are going to do renovations to Davisville Middle School and also proposing to build a new Wickford Middle School on the current site of where Wickford Middle School is now. We have capital improvement projects that we have identified at every single school, which we will go through as well. It's really important that we're putting financial responsibilities as well as responsibilities around maintenance and making sure that our buildings are all safe and healthy and that we're providing 21st century educational experiences for all of our students throughout the district. We will go over the plans for the new Wickford Middle School, and we have our team from Perkins Eastman who will provide that to you, and then we will also go over the financial impact of the bond and the capital improvement projects.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Thank you. All right, so the overview of the bond and also the submission to Rhode Island School Building Authority. This is kind of the summary of what the project scopes and costs are. So as you can see, the Wickford Middle School building project is estimated at a little over 77 million. And then the capital improvement projects, which is district-wide, and it sort of touches every building and every school in the district. And those are estimated at 64 million, a little bit over than that. Over here you can see this is the bond. So the bond is 137,200,000. However, the submission to the state is a little bit over that. So that to Rhode Island School, the School Building Authority, and it's a little bit over. There is another $4 million, $4.2 million in there, and we're calling it the secondary funds. And basically, those funds will get those projects will happen if we see savings in the projects that are in the $137 million scope. So, for example, if there is any savings from the Wickford Middle School, or maybe some projects that are in the capital improvement projects that are come up a little bit less than that, or we recognize certain savings, we still have an approval from the state to get extra reimbursement for those projects. So those scopes have been vetted and reviewed by the school committee, the school building committee, over the past few months. And we will have a little bit more, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But the bottom line is the bond is $137,200,000, but the entire submission to the state is $141,453,470. And we can answer questions at the end as well. So the additional projects for reimbursement we're including because there is a need. I mean, there is a greater need than this. This was vetted very seriously and looked at in great detail in terms of what projects to do. When we estimated the projects that had to happen right now that were picked, we think that if we get rebates, if we also can get certain things for net zero, there could be also credits available. So if that gets applied, say, to Wickford Middle and capital improvement projects, we can also get extra reimbursement from the state. Should we go in next slide? Okay, so the capital improvement project, so this is district-wide. Those have been identified in various meetings, school committee meetings, school building committee meetings. There are recordings and documentation available on those. But we sort of wanted to show that basically every school gets a project, gets an upgrade, and those more go towards the immediate needs. And the immediate needs are, the health and safety, safety and security. The reason why this says in place is we didn't want to leave those blank in safety and security. Every school will get upgraded in terms of making it a more secure entry, a more secure vestibule, but those three schools have those means in place already, like the high school is slightly newer. Davisville Middle has already something in place for that. Also, we looked at roofs, the roof projects, and the ADA and accessibility projects, certain upgrades in those schools. All schools will, by virtue of getting the projects in, will recognize lower operating costs. There is HVAC upgrades as well, HVAC system, a mechanical system, electrical and plumbing systems in the schools. Dr. Duva can answer more and can speak more to the details of the schools, of what we're doing, but this is kind of the whole district-wide approach.
Well, I'll just expand on that for everyone. So, we believe the schools are the most important, facilities within educating, right? You want to make sure that, you're sending your students to schools that are safe, that they're healthy, that they have appropriate learning spaces in them. And now's the time that we need to dedicate that time. We need to dedicate our resources and our finances in order to do that for the town of North Kingstown and for the students and staff and community. So when you look at this is showing at each school what's happening. 21st century learning, that's updates to the building, to the classrooms, something that's happening there. Wickford Middle School being a brand new middle school, that would happen. You're building a new school. Everything is going to be 21st century. It's going to be state of the art for those students. At Davisville Middle School, we're proposing renovating the media center. Right? So they have a 21st century media center that can provide them the education that they need and access to the space and the equipment and materials that are needed. At Fishing Cove and Quinnesset and Stony Lane, we're proposing that in those buildings where there are open classrooms, building actual walls, right? So that enhances the learning space for students. It also is a safety measure that's being put in place as well. Health and wellness is on here because every single elementary school would get a new roof. Upgrades to the heating and ventilation, that's really important for them within those buildings. For the safety and security, as Inga was saying, security vestibles are really important. The schools that don't have them will get them. ADA accessibility, those are requirements that they have to have for the state. So those are certain requirements. It might be curb cuts, it might be upgrading within bathrooms, it might be lowering sinks so they're handicap accessible. Those are the type of items that are on there for ADA. For sustainable stewardship and for lowered operating costs, when you are upgrading and putting in new equipment, that's going to save costs. They're going to be more energy efficient. When you redo the roofs, and we will be doing infrared testing on the roofs to make sure the insulation is good before you put on a new roof, that's going to be savings, and that's going to make sure that the building is more energy efficient.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to the Wickford Middle School architectural team. Tina and Mark, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to introduce you to the new Wickford Middle School and talk about the options that we looked at for the new school prior to just saying we're going to build a new school. We know a lot has changed from last year as well. It was my first year stepping in as superintendent and stepping into this project, and at the time it was for Consolidated Middle School. It was going to be placed at the site of Davisville Middle School. We listened to the community and what people were saying and really tried to take in the feedback that we were receiving. And so then, we moved from Consolidated Middle School to keeping 2 middle schools. Go to the next slide, please. So when we did that, we also considered renovations. We looked at the current building and working with Perkins Eastman, we really looked at what it would take to renovate the building. And so in considering that, you're looking at cost, you're looking at timeline, and you're looking at also the impact on learning. And so we did consider that piece, and we considered what it would be if we built a new Wickford Middle School for our students and for the community and for the future. Renovating a building like new, if you were to do that, there would be additions that we would put on. It would address accessibility issues that we have in that building. With the proposal, we'd have a new entrance, redoing kitchen space, the gymnasium, other areas within the building for classroom space. We would make sure that the parking lot, looking at traffic flow, would be considered, looking at the fields. The concern with doing that is cost, because it would cost more than building new, and also the timeline. It would be 39 months to renovate the building. And when you think about that in years for students and for teaching and learning, that's an entire middle school career that students would be in a building that's being renovated. And now you're talking about bringing trailers in and putting trailers there, and teachers having to go in and out of trailers, moving from trailers to the school. That's a big disruption to learning that we really wanted to avoid in this process. And that's a concern. When we look at building new, right, we know that building a new school would provide an efficient building layout. It would provide more efficiencies and energy saving for the building and for the community. We would also be able to look at new athletic fields as well. And constructing a new school would be around 26 months, less than it would be to renovate. Students would be able to stay in the current middle school while the new middle school is being built, so you're not having major disruptions to their learning, which is really important. And when you think of it as an education and talk to educators and families, that's really important to them and to the students. The project cost was also less than renovating. The other thing to really be thinking about is that we want what's best for our students for the future. And by building a new school, you can really look at the high performance of the building, right? And the systems you're putting in place. and really think of those educational spaces. And we've taken the time, we've met with teaching staff, especially from Whitford Middle School, talking about a layout of the building. What do we need inside those buildings and classrooms for students? Thinking about not just the classroom spaces, but also what else can we offer to them. So, new media library space, technology, a STEM classroom space that's really important in preparing them. An art wing, a music wing, dedicated space for chorus, for band, a cafeteria that also has a performance space, so that they have that to use as well, which is all really important, outdoor learning, and looking also at the athletic fields, which we know, hearing from others, was important for us to be considering and moving forward for the district. There's also benefits to the community with a new building. When in our design and thinking about the new building, we are proposing that this building can also be used as an emergency shelter for the community. And meeting with the town and the police and the fire, that was something that was important for all of us here in the community to have. It also provides a new gymnasium for the community. We know that's a need, and working with the rec department, and as well as meeting spaces that can be used by community members and upgrading the fields for those in town.
Okay, so I'll walk you through a little bit of the middle school design. So as Dr. Duva spoke about, the idea here is that the new building will go essentially where the field is today along Tower Hill Road. This allows us to do all the construction in one phase while the students still safely attend the existing middle school. We also then are able to, once that building comes down, create new fields, relocate the softball field. We'll have separate bus and car drop-off, so there's a lot of traffic that comes along with the school, and one of the things we really want to do is make sure that it's very safe and orderly at pickup and drop-off. There's also a service lane that goes around the whole building, so in terms of, we've met with first responders, we've met with fire, we've met with police in terms of their ability to access the building and serve the community. So I think it's really shaping up to be a very successful approach. Next slide. So these are the floor plans. We're still very much in the beginning of the concept. So there's a lot more to go, but some of the things that Dr. Duva talked about. So there's kind of a central street or spine that runs through the building, not too dissimilar from the high school, but maybe at a smaller middle school scale. So that's a nice way of orientating everyone who comes to the school. We have the public shared spaces up front. So the cafeteria, which also acts as a performance space, and the gymnasium. These are probably the two most visited spaces. So those are close to the front door, to the secure vestibule. Classrooms are to the back of the building. This way, students are in a very secure place, and when the facility is being used, like we're using tonight, in evenings and weekends, because it's a big resource for the whole community, we can close off the classroom space and only have those public spaces accessed. Some of the other things that we talked about, the new media center with the STEM tech center located right next door, all the classrooms. So it's very much what I think of as a very middle school design. Because in middle school, students start to move around. You start to see departments come out like you would in high school. So we have science and art rooms and music departments. So the students start to get into that habit of moving a little bit more self-directed work. So we have some breakout spaces included. And then the classroom, just the classroom portion, has a second story.
So this is basically sort of a bird's eye view of everything Mark was just discussing. And you can start to see, I mean, it's very exciting. Here's Tower Hill Road. And as he described, the organization of the building has this spine with the public spaces up front. The administration area is right up front, so all eyes on the entry. That's a passive way of really handling security in a very, very well-designed manner. You have the car queue and the bus queue separated. Separating the cars and the bus traffic is right out of the gate, one of the most important things that you can do to the circulation of any school site. We also, as Mark was highlighting, so you can see this is all the one-story public space and then the two-story classroom wing. When a high-performance building, as Dr. Duba highlighted, also starts with building orientation. This building has been specifically oriented so that this classroom wing is along the east-west axis. That allows you to control the glare of light coming into the classrooms the best way. And those are those kinds of things high-performance building does, is it addresses these sort of stressors that affect or can disrupt everyday learning. So, so the building starts with that orientation. We have a very robust envelope, meaning that the outside of the building is designed to keep the temperature the same and not either heat the outside or cool the outside. And then, as Dr. Duba explained, we have very sophisticated systems. So one of the things is we have 80 geothermal wells underneath the parking lot. So we have a ground source heat pump. The building is fully electric, and we will be producing enough electricity to offset the demand. Now, on cloudy days, I'm looking at our engineer, there are times where you do have to pull from the grid, but there are also times that we can actually sell back to the grid. So this is a very exciting building, not only because of those performance elements and systems, but also it's a way of describing and creating awareness about how important those systems are to this community. Thank you.
I think we have a few more renderings of the building. So this is a view of the entry, as we spoke about. There's a car drop-off and a bus drop-off that are separate, but all students come to a single secure entry point. And our designers did a nice job of kind of scaling the building down to the entry point. So it's a bit smaller in scale at the entry, but still very clear idea of where you enter the building. If you go to the next slide. And then along Tower Hill Road, you see, as Tina talked about, because the classroom wings are orientated so that all the classrooms face north or south, we have these sort of nice end gables that face the road. So we're also concerned about, as we get into a little bit more historic part of town, wanting the building to reflect that while still being very contemporary. So the use of materials like brick, the standing seam roofs and the pitch roof help to sort of blend those two needs. Then a view from Tower Hill Road. The building also sets up to create a couple of courtyards, which we spoke about. It also is one of the things that is really helpful, a really big part of the design is to have outdoor learning space. It's something that RIDE really encourages. Students do really well when they can get outside. We've had a couple of beautiful days recently, so I'm sure they want to take advantage of that. So we have two courtyards. This one is the one that is adjacent to the media center or the library. So in a very supervised way, students could come and have class outside of the library. On the other side, nearer to the gym and the cafeteria, there's another courtyard that faces the fields.
Okay, so reimbursement by the state. So this is part of the housing aid program from the Rhode Island School Department and Rhode Island Building, the Rhode Island Department of Education. Housing aid program is a reimbursement program, so the town has to appropriate all the funds up front and expend the funds, meaning build the program that has been submitted on, build at least 50% of it. To get reimbursed at the end. So the reimbursement gets 50% of the 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 50% of reimbursed at the end of all the projects, and also it includes the interest. So the base rate, which is listed here, which is 35%, this is the share of the state. So the state reimburses 35%, inclusive of the interest that's incurred, and they pay the bond direct. And then the town share is the remainder, and they are paying the bonded funds direct as well. There is an additional 5%, up to 5% possible incentives out there, and that is on health and safety or on the water and energy efficiency. So the town can choose one or the other. The energy efficiency and water efficiency bonus is up to 4%. So in this case, we will go for the additional 5%, but for any other reason, this building, Wickford Middle School, will definitely qualify for the water and energy efficiency bonus. So one of those, so that's why we're saying it's up to 5% of possible incentives. So that would be up to 40% total on reimbursement. And that is an eligible cost, and also we are tracking several incentives and credits for net zero, for geothermal, and that is all kind of part of submitting to the state and and also developing the projects further. Now, this is the 35% and 5%. This is eligible for the entire program, so the entire submission will qualify at the end of completion, the time of completion. Did I miss anything? Or? No? Okay.
So good evening. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on the financial aspect of this. And as I'm sure a lot of you know, so once this project, if this project goes forward, it's the town that will end up financing the project. All purchases will be approved by the council. Our finance team will work with the school department finance team and come up with a plan that lessens the impact to the taxpayer. I just want to spend a couple of minutes explaining that. And again, these are tough slides to read, but they'll all be on the website. And I will spend a couple of minutes explaining why we're showing slides like this. So these slides are not meant to show what your taxes will be if the bonds pass. And I say that because these are financial projections. I know that's what we all want to know, but you have to remember that number one, next year we're in a state-mandated statistical revaluation year, which means that even if we don't pass bonds, everybody's taxes will be affected differently. So I just want to be clear because we want to give good information. But this is not meant to show what your taxes will be. It shows the basic financial impact of these bonds. I can also tell you that I've been involved in a number of projects like this, and it's the innovative financing, which I'll talk about in a minute, that we can take advantage of to lessen the impact. We also have to remember that this is the impact of this bond, or the school department is just a portion of a much larger budget. If revenues go up, the impact is less. If revenues go down, the impact is more. If expenses go up, the impact is more. So there's so much involved in the budget, and I know you know this, but I just want to do full disclosure that this only shows a small portion of what should take place. Now, for example, and again, I feel obligated to go over this, so forgive me if I'm boring everyone, because I'm the last person, so we're going to read the questions and answers. But this shows how we can innovatively take advantage of the fact that the town is reducing a lot of our debt in order to lessen the impact of these bonds. So as Inga had mentioned, we don't receive reimbursement until a significant portion, if not all the portion of the project is completed. So you don't want to go out for bond before the project is completed. If we have a $137,200,000 bond, if we went out to bond the minute it passed and received all this money and started the project, we wouldn't receive a penny of reimbursement until a significant portion of the project was completed, which means that the impact would be significant. Also, we don't experience what I call a debt cliff, but it's really a reduction in our debt. We don't experience that until about 2028. So what we want to do is we want to innovatively finance this so that way we lessen the impact, which will be the next slide in a minute. So for example, and this is just one portion, that we met with our financial advisors. Our financial team, we've gone through this, I've pushed back. This is probably the 20th version of what we've come up with, so I want to get something as confident as possible. So this is just one way we could do this. In year one, we would actually only draw down on $35 million. And so we would only have an interest-only payment in year one because we don't enjoy the reduction in our debt in year one. So we don't want to have a large payment. So we draw $35 million, it's called a bond anticipation note, interest only, and you sit there, we only pay interest, and we begin financing the project. Then year two, we'll draw down on another $75 million, so, and also draw down another $27 million, which is 2028. So now we're paying interest only on a larger portion. But again, we're doing it because we want to time it with reimbursement, and you'll see that in the next slide. In reality, according to this plan, we wouldn't actually turn the bands over and for a bond until 2030. And that's because we start receiving state aid. And so I'm going to go to the next slide, which I think does a much better job of explaining this. This is if the school department, the school bond passed. So for example, this column right here, and please know this is on our website, on the school department website, on our website. The column to the left is our existing debt service. It's what we have in loans right now. A good portion of it is the high school. You'll see that in 2025, the year we're in right now, it's 4.6 million. In 2026, it's 4.5 million. Then all of a sudden in 2027, we drop $1.3 million. And then in 2028, we drop again. In 2029, we drop again. So the idea is, and again, this is how I've done it in the past, and I feel confident with this, and our financial advisor has confirmed this. The idea is to begin paying the principal when you start enjoying the debt reduction. In addition, we don't want to pay the principal until we start getting reimbursement from the state. And so under this scenario, as you can see, in 2027, we have net debt of 4.9 million. And so, but that's when that debt goes down. So the number I think that everybody's looking for is basically if the school, according to our current numbers, and remembering what I said earlier about statistical reval, about budgets changing, according to our current numbers, this bond, if we do this right, should have a maximum impact, I think it could be lower, of 62 cents on the tax rate. And what 62 cents basically is on a $450,000 home, you're looking at approximately $280. That's spread out over more than 1 year. So the way we've done it here is in year one, you'd have a $100 increase, and in year two, you'd have a $180 increase. After that, because of the debt reduction, you'll see that there's nothing. There's no more impact at all until, well, that's on the next slide where you'll see a reduction, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So if we time this properly, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, so please know I'm here to answer any questions. So if anything, I didn't do a good job of explaining this, please come up and say, Ralph, I got a question, and please ask it, because we want to get information out. But if we time this properly, I'm confident that we can reduce the impact of these bonds, take advantage of a debt reduction, take advantage of a significant reimbursement, time it properly, and lessen the impact of this $137 million bond, 137.2. If you go to the next slide for a minute. Now, I felt obligated to show that there's two bond questions, and so we'll be doing the same thing on Wednesday night. And the reason why I feel obligated is because, and I hope I explain this right, we can only take advantage of the debt reduction once. So what I mean by that is that I can't show you a amortization schedule where the school takes advantage of the debt reduction, and then Wednesday night show an amortization schedule where the town takes advantage of the debt reduction. That's misleading you. So I want to show you that if both questions pass, we can only take advantage of the debt reduction once. And so you'll see the same exact amortization schedule, but now I'm adding the public safety complex to it. And so should we do that, you're looking at I believe it's about $1.27, so that's about right, $1.27 tax increase over 2 years, maybe 3, depending on how we time this. And that would impact in year one about $190 on a $450,000 assessed home. We'll talk about that in a minute. And in year two, $382. So you're looking at about $572, $570 over a series of years. I say assessed because when I say a $450,000 home, someone may say, oh, my home is worth $800,000, but it may not be assessed $800. So it's the assessed rate they're referring to. So an average, actually, we're going through a reval right now, but 450 is actually on the high side as far as average assessment. Average sale, average purchase price, totally different. We're going through that now. And so this shows how we're going to take advantage of this just once. And we can't take advantage of it twice. That would be misleading. I guess the best way to explain this, I tried this before, and I know you've already got it, but just in case, if I have a car and my car loan is $300, and I'm paying off I own that $300 car loan, and I'm looking for a new car. And the new car, then the gentleman or the lady come out and they say, it's gonna cost you $600 a month. When I sit down, the impact is not $600, it's $3, because I'm erasing my $300 loan. That's what this is. We have an impact of a school, we have an impact of a public safety complex, but we're erasing other loans that we have. So the impact isn't $600, it's net of the reduction. If I buy 2 cars, I can't use the $300 twice. That's what I'm trying to say here. So if I buy a car, and my other car is paid off, and I buy a second car, now it's $1,200. It's not $1,200 minus 3 twice. I can only subtract it once, because I'm only trading in 1 car. Again, so that's why I don't want to mislead people. We can only use the debt reduction once. But again, all I can do is I can tell you that we feel very, very comfortable. I've done this before. We feel very, very comfortable that should these bonds pass, we have a very solid foundation to accomplish this with state reimbursement and have a reduced impact, or else we wouldn't be comfortable doing this. So I'd say that with confidence, and I feel that this is probably the maximum impact that we would have. And again, afterwards, if there's any questions, please just mention when you come up, say there's a specific question for me. I'm happy to try to clarify this, because this isn't easy to do, and my greatest nightmare is 2 years from now, someone shows me a slide and says, that's not what you said. And so I'm trying to make sure that I'm explaining it this evening. So thank you. I think that's it.
So that's the end of our presentation. This slide here, this QR code will bring you to our school facility website that has the plans, what we're talking about, any documents, any reports that we have on that, presentations, minutes from our meetings. That's all up on that website. And the link is there as well. We are now going to open up to questions and answers for the community, and we're all here from members from the school department, Perkins Eastman, Jacobs. We have members from PAR and our engineer, as well as school committee members that can answer questions. If there's a question that might not be able to respond to tonight, we'll provide you that answer. There is a sign up here if anyone wants to sign up, or you can just respectfully come to the podium and ask your question.
Sorry, I fell asleep on the leg. Brett Mallory, 731 Aquatucket. So for the design on there, starting with the bus exit. So it's not aligned with the church street. So you have the church exit, crosswalk, and then you'll have your bus line. Why is there no consideration to align it to a perfect T intersection and then maybe make a recommendation of where you have a timed light, certain bus hours where the light is activated only during those times, and then you disable the light for that cost? Because that is a huge safety issue, and you're having buses coming out of one thing, maybe people coming out of the church parking lot, and we already know that Post Road is, well, Post Road. So that's the first one.
Right, so that's a great question, and I would say that that's something we'll continue to look at. As I said, it was only, what we're showing now is really concept scope. So doing a little bit more traffic studies and looking at alternates where we could align those. We have heard that before. That's just something that would happen in the next phase, because right now we're waiting for RIDE's review of the entire site design and building design.
Okay, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to mention that there's 3 more phases after this one for design. There's another schematic design phase, post-RIDE approval. There is a design development phase and construction document phase, just to clarify if some folks don't know. So these plans are schematic design plans that went to the state. Once we received the state's comments and approvals, the design phase, which is called stage 3, if you've heard of RIDE's terminology, begins, and there is 3 more phases and 3 more estimates, and Also, the next schematic design phase will have to include more traffic studies and such and those things. So, just clarification.
Okay, so the next one on there is the orientation of the gym and the media center. Now, I know you talked about the lights on there, the sun, got a big fireball in the sky. My problem is, if you want outdoor learning in the environment, the school provides a perfect backdrop of a wall against US 1 for noise. And having the outdoor learning on the US 1 side seems not the most best way to put forward outdoor learning. If we're more concerned about light, I'll give up a few megawatts or whatever it is on power to provide a better sound attenuation for the children on the other side, if it makes sense swapping the gym and the media center.
Right, that's another good one. I think we did actually have an earlier version that was like that. I think for now, and we'll have more user group meetings and meet with faculty in more detail, I think what was driving that was having the gym and cafeteria close to the fields, and that relationship for PE and athletics was probably what was driving that. And what we had then done was look at landscape solutions that would provide safety and privacy for that courtyard that's closer to the road. But I don't think there's really a right or wrong there. Those are things that we try to balance.
If I can add, when we made that change, we also moved it because the service delivery area, which is by the cafeteria near the gymnasium, would have been out on the main road, and we were also kind of thinking of the design of how it would look, and did not think that would be a good look for everyone driving by, and you're seeing a service side of the building versus something that's more aesthetic.
Okay. Next on there with the ride reimbursements, are we talking 35% for the building itself or for the entire bond?
It's 35% for the entire bond.
So
It's
with
the base rate, so the entire scope. So if we can flip back for a second to the slide, the second slide, I think. No, not that one. The other one. Closer to the beginning. If you can go to I think it was number 2 or number 3 after the agenda. Yeah, this one. So the reimbursement is on the entire 141,453,470. So that is the base rate that the town gets on the entire submission to the state. Last year, there were additional incentives that applied only to certain types of construction, like the new buildings. Those incentives no longer exist. They expired last year. So the base rate is the base rate. And the additional percentage is the 5%, which is likely to, it is in the legislature, and it's a health and safety, so basically everything applies.
Okay, so knowing that, and now we're putting, simple math, let's call it 45 million to the state on there. With a state that's running a deficit of $250 million for the next 3-4 years, what conversations have we had with tax implications that's also going to come to state taxes that are going to put onto your residents?
So obviously, I can tell you from my interactions right now, I'm actually going to a summit next week on education financing. And I know we have as members of our local delegation here that will have much more knowledge of that on this than I do. But I can tell you from history that we right now in North Kingstown are at the lowest percentage, the 35%. I don't see that going lower at all. I know the state is facing some.
Well, that's not what I'm talking. I'm not talking about the percentage going low. I'm saying we're saying about $45 billion of that has to go into the state. Ride's paying for it, right? For the 35%. Let's say that's 45 million.
Right.
This Ride is run by the state, correct?
That's exactly, but I am answering your question. That's exactly what I said.
Right. What I'm saying is that the state is at a $250 million.
Understand that, and what I'm saying, and I was answering that question. What I'm saying is that despite the fact that there is a deficit, I can tell you that they're not going to resolve that deficit by reducing reimbursement to communities like North Kingstown. We're already at the lowest base of 35%, and so, in my professional opinion, having been involved in this for a while, as they're erasing this deficit or addressing this deficit, I will be floored, shocked, in complete confidence that that will not be on the table. 35, so I don't see them going back and saying, okay, you're no longer being reimbursed the 35%.
That's not the question though, is what is the tax implication from the state to the residents of the state? How much more of the taxes of the state have to go up to pay for 250?
That's a question for the governor of the General Assembly, and but that has nothing to do with this project.
I understand that.
Okay.
However, we're saying property taxes are going up, state taxes will somewhat, you're not gonna cut programs.
You don't know that, I can't answer that, you don't know that. I'm not gonna say you're not, because we've had deficits before, and it doesn't necessarily mean taxes went up. So again, I'll leave that to the state, but this project itself will not result in that. And I can also say, now that I have the floor, I just realized this, that the numbers that I show were based on 35%. So with a 40% reimbursement, that impact will be less. It also is based on a 4% interest rate. We see interest rates going down, and I believe there's a community that just went out for a bond whose rating was not as great as ours, and they went at 4.2%. So we looked at the worst case scenario.
Oh, the math, I like your math.
I just want to mention that now that I had a chance, because I didn't realize that. I would have said that earlier, so thanks.
No worries. And then for the projects on there for the ventilation, actually, let me start with the ADA. Is the ADA, you're saying that we're out of compliance of ADA regulations? Were we grandfathered into that? Or are we likely to get a lawsuit because we're out of compliance with something?
So there are ADA requirements that we have to put in place, right, that are required. And that's what we've identified within our capital improvement projects for the schools that need them.
So you're saying they're required, so are we liable to get sued if we don't put them in?
I wouldn't say that we would get sued, but what we've been noted through the evaluations that assessments we've had on the building, these are required to be put in place. But I wouldn't say that the state would come and sue us. The state would like that, and would like those projects to be completed, so that way we are in compliance, so that way our buildings are accessible to all of our students, community members, and employees that work there.
No, I get that. I just want to understand if there's a blowback from the state potentially, if we're not meeting requirements that we should have been meeting years ago. So this goes into when we have a capital improvement budget, that looking through the school budget is not, if we're running a surplus of what, 1.5 over the last couple of years, Rob? Why can't we add a $250,000 extra capital improvement to the budget for the school to run some of these programs that would have solved the ADA on there over the last couple of years? If, again, I understand it hasn't snowed really heavily since 22, and that's probably saving us money on salt, however, $250,000 each year. If we're running a 1.5 million surplus, I would figure that it would be able to be added into the school budget to take care of some of these projects.
So, great point. I can tell you that to the defense of the school department, they have asked for capital funding. So that falls on the town. But I will say that while I say that, I'm also proud to say that over these last 7 or 8 years, we did an analysis, and there's not one community in Rhode Island, not one, who comes even close to the percentage of funding that the town gives the school department year over year as far as increases. So we have given the maximum, not the maximum. We have done very well. But to the defense of the school department, they have asked for capital in the past where the town has not given it. So I just want to have full disclosure there.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm not a Rhode Island resident, so I have to ask these questions. So my tax bills have. Last part on the HVAC upgrades on there. So the question got asked last year, because remember Forest Park's what, 57? Built in 57? I don't remember these schools. Forest Park.
For the FCI scores?
Not the scores, but when they were constructed, because we're using Wickford as a age requirement on there for being built, and the likelihood of having to probably add a elementary school or another middle school down the road within the next 5-10 years. I know we've denied it, the school committee's denied it as well, but let's face facts. If we're using an excuse for age now for Wickford, which I've stated openly on video, I've supported a new school. However, some of the expenses on there, including some of the HVAC costs, especially when you consider 2 of your schools are up there and not well efficient on there. We're looking at upgrading something that's probably going to get voted on here probably in the next 5 to 10 years for another school, just based off your scores. and based off of the age. But
So I would, we can't answer a question of the future if we're going to ever go out to bond again and say we want to propose building a new school. But what I can say is the capital improvement projects that we're putting in place is to maintain the current elementary schools that we have. Right now, there isn't a need to go build a new elementary school. We're looking at projects that are going to maintain those schools so that way they can stay open and they can continue to operate for the students in the future. By upgrading the HVAC in the buildings, specifically when talking about Forest Park, when you're redoing the ventilation, putting in new exhaust fans, you're making that like new. So you're now redoing those systems so they're more efficient for the buildings, and you're able to keep those buildings open longer. You're also putting a new roof on the school at Forest Park. When you focus on your building envelope, you're maintaining and you're also increasing the life of that school.
I get the roofs. I have no issues with the roofs. It's more the HVACs with the system on there, because having to replace the fan, the realigning it for noise on there, because I looked at each exhaust fan, you're running about 1.5 for each exhaust fan, if I add it up, if it's correct, on there for each exhaust fan with the different, unless the sound attenuations for something different. Am I reading that one correctly for the exhaust process? Is it like 4 different on the budgets there, on the capital improvements to add into one?
I'm sorry.
So the exhaust fan projects for all your HVACs, you have different line items on the capital improvement project. So I want to say it's like page 15, some of those, you start talking about the exhaust fans, and you have 4 different line items, probably for each exhaust fan on there. So that if you add all the costs up for probably one HVAC process, it's about $1.5 million.
Right, so if you look at the printout of the capital improvement plan, I don't have that in front of me. But when you look at under HVAC and you look at each school, each building is listed, and each of those areas that are getting renovated or it's going to be new equipment, that's listed there, and those costs are there. And you can look at that and you can add up and say, okay, this is what the cost would be for the HVAC at each school as well as across the district.
Okay. And the last one, because I think the HVACs are your 20% extra fluff that's in the system right now. So if the cost overruns, because we're running, I don't count Providence schools, because Providence is a disaster in its own. But with the 4 schools that overrun right now with needing more money, if they go over budget and we have this bond out there, how are we holding the people that build this accountable to hold to a timeline into their budget? Is there a caveat that we can put into the contract to hold them accountable to these timelines and to the budget and penalize them for exceeding? Because I don't want to run into the same situation that the other 4 districts like Warwick, Newport, and all the other ones.
When we look at the AIA contracts, there is a clause in there that will keep them within a timeline, and then what that penalty fee would be on them if they don't complete it within the timeline that we want them to do it in.
And will that, once the contract is signed, will that be public?
Yes.
Are you referencing the construction contract or the design contract or the program itself?
Anything, because when you go over anything that's going to deal with the construction specific, I understand roof, small cost growth work on there. We're talking about the main school project construction. So for $77 million, how much growth are we willing to accept when it goes over cost? Because that's what's going to eat up into some of this other money on here. And when we're talking about like Warwick, Newport, Johnson, all the 4 communities that had to ask for more money on there, how are we holding people accountable? How's that going to be put out to your public? Because that has not been advertised on that accountability piece. And we've seen it across the state on there. Again, I don't hold Providence, that's different. But.
So first of all, I would say that some of that you hear, well, that I do know what you're talking about, and a lot of those communities hit and started those projects during COVID. So there is a one-off across the board, all across the country that has happened.
Warwick was just now, though.
Well, Warwick, yes, but Warwick started a while ago, but that's fine. What I'm saying is, first of all, RIDE, the state does not allow just to go over. So we're submitting on these numbers. We cannot just say, okay, well, today is 77 million and tomorrow it's 90, and we're just going to move money around. We will not get reimbursed. The district will not get reimbursed. So that is why those budgets are set with contingencies and allowances within the budget. So we had an estimator, and we estimated the project, and there are contingencies in there. So within, we don't have a crystal ball though, like we don't know if there is something unusual that may or may not happen. That is obviously a caveat. However, assuming the 6% escalation per year, which is the new industry standard, to midpoint of construction, including all the soft costs, including the contingencies and allowances, this is the project cost that we have today. And that is escalated through the completion of, through the midpoint of its construction, which is again the industry standard.
And last one on here, because I know people don't want to hear me anymore, but critical path work, how is that going to be assessed in the public information put out? So as we get to the critical junction points, to say we're on track, we're behind budget, we're on time, whatever, that whether we're considering ourselves green, yellow, or red for the project completion, when do we think, how are we publicizing that to the public? Is that going to come out in regular meetings, school committee meetings, town meetings? How are we advertising this as things progress along? Because the last thing that these people want is a last minute notification that, hey, we're screwed.
So when we begin, right now there is a timeline, right? So we do have a timeline that is on our website. As we begin the project, as we move ahead with each project, that's going to be outlined as well. So you'll have from the beginning to the end of the design to the construction to the finish. And we will provide those updates and keep that information available so everyone knows, because that is something that we would report on frequently through school committee with updates on the projects as we move forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Joe Texero. I live on 200 Delano Drive. Those are great questions. Thank you very much for those very good questions. I just have a few questions concerning the potentiality of this build. One of my first questions is, this is conceptual right now. So basically you had to come up with a number to put out for bond. Is that correct? Because it's still in concept phase.
So it is in the schematic design phase. The concept phase is more of when you have sketches. We have a construction, I don't want to say construction, it's wrong. It's a schematic design construction document set,
Okay.
which has all of the trades and all of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all the consulting trades in the set. So technically speaking, it's just the state requires us to look at it again. So it's basically part one of schematic design. So it's not in concept. It has been drawn and has been planned and estimated. So.
Okay. One of my concerns I have is that the total square foot cost is approximately, I'm going to round it off, about $980 per square foot for the school. Now, I've done some research, and RIDE has a little booklet that they put out, and they said a middle school should be around the low bid, average low bid that's coming in is around $596 per square foot. So my issue is, 986 is a big jump. I can see $100 a square foot jump. 986 is a big leap. So maybe one of the architects can describe why is there such a substantial difference?
Well, yeah, I can begin a little bit. I think RIDE does set a per square foot number that they reimburse to. And I'm not a construction management, I'm the architect side of things. We're not seeing that matches what's the street cost of things. We're doing a number of projects in Rhode Island. All of them are over the RIDE reimbursement in the 800 to 900 square foot. That's what we're seeing, and Inga could speak to that in terms of other projects you're familiar with. So I don't think there's anything particularly exotic about this project, other than, that, as Inga referred to, post-COVID, prices have just leaped up kind of exponentially. But I think we've tried to be pretty conservative about the design beyond some of the, programmatic and the sustainability in the envelope. But in terms of the geometry of the building, the amount, the materials we're choosing, I think we're trying to be pretty modest.
Okay. I just asked that question because not only for a Rhode Island bill, but in Holyoke, Massachusetts, they just finished the middle school last year, and they were around $780, $790. So it seems like, why are we always higher than everybody else? Even in New York City, I haven't seen a middle school in New York City for $1,000 a square foot. I'm just bringing it up. I'm just putting it out there.
First of all, first, it's hard to compare cost per square foot from state to state and even sometimes project to project because it depends what is that square foot cost. So some states include all in, right? So you take the 77 million, you divide it by the square footage, comes up your 900. The 593 you're referencing, it's only soft cost plus construction costs, excluding demo, excluding some items that are not within that. There is a calculation in the RIDES worksheet. There is a whole budget calculation, excluding certain site remediation items, also excluding furniture, technology, anything that's we call FF&E. So this is what the Rhode Island baseline for cost per square foot. This is what you hear. Sometimes when you're referencing and you're asking certain individuals or companies or entities, what is the cost per square foot? Some construction companies will tell you $750, but that is what their guaranteed maximum price was, which is their construction brick and mortar plus their markups, right? Massachusetts has a slightly different calculation on cost per square foot and how it's being reimbursed. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there is a different worksheet that they develop. So when you're referencing the 750, do you mean literally all in, or do you mean 750 eligible costs? Was it 700 or what?
That was all in for Holyoke. That was
That's
all in.
for, when was it built?
Last year. It was completed last year. But that's okay, because I have a very important question, and it relates back to our current school. Maybe this is a question for our facilities person. What is the current heating system there? Is it natural gas or oil or what?
In the Wakeford School?
Yes.
I don't know.
Natural gas.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's natural gas. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, this is a question for the architects. If we go out and do a build or a rehab, wouldn't we put in the highest efficiency under state law, and I'm assuming that that should be at least 95, 96% efficiency heating and air conditioning systems? That's just a yes or no question.
The question is, if we were to do a renovation?
Renovation or build, and you did natural gas heating, you would choose 94, 95, 96 plus efficiency products, correct?
I'm going to do, yes,
Yes.
our mechanical engineers here.
Okay.
Yes, it would be the high efficiency condensing.
Okay. All right, so they're probably high efficiency condensing boilers.
Which is in that range of the percentages. That you
Okay, good. All right, so that leads me to the next question. My goal is to save money. These numbers are scary. And a couple of other questions I have before I even get into how to save money. But my next question is, how large is the gym? How many square feet has been allocated for the gym?
Yeah, we'll double check, it's about 7,000 square feet.
Okay. How much is the cost estimate for the gym? How much is set aside?
We don't have the cost estimate for the gym broken out specifically,
I-
but we,
I thought I saw $6 million. Is that incorrect?
Specifically for the gym and all of its systems, I'd have to check that, but we can certainly get something together that.
Okay, so that's a very big number. $6 million for a gym. That's almost 8% of the total budget for the school.
I just want to kind of have some clarification. Did we present that at one of our meetings, a breakdown of cost for the gym and what that cost would be?
Yeah, I am curious where that number.
Yeah.
You had it in your, there was an actual breakdown. It didn't give the square footage, but you had $6 million set aside.
No, that's wrong. That was, okay, you're going back on old information that was prior to even coming up with this project. We were going to dedicate funds for Davisville Middle School to redo their gym. That is not Brookfield Middle, and we're not doing that. So those numbers are inaccurate and not correct.
Okay, so we don't know the number for this gym.
No. That's why I wanted to clarify, because we never gave a breakdown of each area within the building. So.
We do know November. It is, I believe we posted the latest estimate, because we did go over the estimated costs. So the number for the entire gym could be broken out within that estimate. Because it's hard, you can go and say, okay, well, this is the gym, this is the square foot, but you have to really kind of take all the system and go into it. So the cost estimate exists, but it doesn't specifically list out a gym and its own entity, because it's part of the entire building.
Okay. Help me understand the net zero cost. Do you have the cost for net zero?
Yes.
How much is that, please?
So we did, and I'm gonna also look to Mike, we do have our engineer with us. We did take a look at what it would cost if you use sort of a more conventional fossil fuel burning system, which Mike can describe, and it was just under $5 million of savings if you were to use that as a first-time cost. But over the life of the system, you actually come out better with the geothermal, heat, ground source heat pump system with an array of PVs on the roof. And Mike, do you want to add to that? Or can?
Yeah, I mean, what you said, I think the numbers are like 10 million, rounded, it's like 10 million for the geothermal and close to 6 million. So it's like a $4 million savings for.
4.9, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Sorry, just the numbers.
The geothermal system was just under 10 million, and the traditional gas heating and electric chiller cooling was right at 6 million, so it's about a $4 million savings comparing those two systems. But like Tina had mentioned, if you factor in the energy efficiency and the cost save, or the rebates and everything with the geothermal, that payback comes at around between year 15 and 20 on the life cycle cost analysis between those two systems. So over the life of the 30 years that were studied, it's a less expensive system to have the more energy efficient.
Over 15 years. You have to wait till 15 years for the break-even point.
Correct.
Okay. And I think I'll just go with my last question.
I may add relative
Go
to
ahead.
that.
Yep.
And that may or may not, I'm sorry, this may or may not be relevant, but if some of you may know that Rhode Island had, the state has committed to, I believe, and I may be wrong in the facts, I don't have that legislature in front of me, but there's a drive towards the electrification of all buildings, because the state of Rhode Island has committed to be a fully, I believe, all electric and to source, and I'm sorry for trying to retrieve the information, but to source all the electricity for the state by 2033 through alternative energy means, so through solar or wind energy. So this is something that's been kind of a driver. And what we are seeing, even though some of that information hasn't made it into legislature specifically for right requirements yet. What we are seeing when we're submitting new construction, not renovations. Renovations are a little bit different to the state for review. There is definitely the kind of drive and support towards electric systems versus the gas or the oil systems, and this is just what it is as a fact in the state specifically.
Okay, and as far as the 80 geothermal wells, what has been your success rate in your past architectural builds using geothermal wells? How many times have you designed and implemented geothermal wells, schools, or safety complexes?
We have right at 100 schools that we've done across the country with geothermal, and I mean they're all successful. I mean there aren't any that didn't perform or anything. We have one in Connecticut where we just it was a renovation where we just confirmed last month that it actually met the net zero energy that was the goal of the project. So they were able to achieve that.
And how many feet down do you have to drill for a geothermal well, especially if there's going to be 80? So how many is each well drilled down?
500 feet.
Okay, 500 feet. Okay, I'll end there, and maybe someone can follow me and ask the question about the current land the school is built on. I want to know what's underneath the ground before we anticipate drilling for geothermal wells. That's why I'm a firm believer in natural gas. It's very clean energy. 96% efficiency or more when you use condescending boilers. So I just need somebody to follow me that has a little more expertise as to the history of what's under middle school, Wickford Middle School. Thank you very much for your time.
I may add relative to cost overall, and I know there's a lot of details in terms of 77 million and the number and the 64, but as I said, there is still 3 phases of this, and every phase gets an estimate. And the design team here keeps on designing and looking into ways to save, to make the building more efficient, to make the building more cost efficient, energy efficient. There is a commitment to net zero. However, at this stage, and there is so many contingencies in place to make sure we don't run over. However, there is always room to be under, and I think the goal is to not to have to run over the 77. But if there is an opportunity to be under the 77, that is the reason why we put that secondary funds number over there, because those projects can happen and the reimbursement can happen for those projects. So just wanted to clarify that.
Good evening, my name is Mary Lowe Presti. I live at 29 Chestnut Road. I came this evening as a taxpayer and voter, really wanting to cast my vote to support the bond issue, but really needing some answers to questions. I also come as a parent of a former student. When my son Michael entered the school system and transitioned from early intervention to the school system in 2010, actually Dr. Duva was the person who ushered us in, and I remember when he sat in my living room and I asked about what was the sort of disability demographic of the town. Michael at the time was profoundly disabled, never walked, never talked, did not have a great quality of life ahead of him, and we wanted to kind of get a sense of how the schools would be able to meet his needs. At the time, and I think this pretty much held through until his early death last year, that over his 13 years in the school system, that he was the most profoundly disabled student in the district. So I come here tonight speaking as a parent of a student and who was in the schools for those years in various schools. I don't know if there are any current parents here. I was a little disappointed to find out that the information about tonight was not disseminated until sort of last minute. Maybe that was not accurate. There was another parent who said, I would love to be able to come, but that person has a disabled child and can't just leave the child without care. So I speak tonight from my experience parenting Michael and wanting to see the best quality options for our students, and specifically those who are in the moderate to profoundly disabled category. I know that currently there are approximately 500 students in the district who have either an IEP or a 504 plan. So I'm talking about those who are the most profoundly disabled. Oftentimes those who use durable medical equipment to get around. So my question is this. Last year I spoke on 2 occasions to the building subcommittee meeting advocating for not just compliance with the ADA, but there is a thing called being ADA friendly. So it's not just we're going to check off the boxes, but it is creating an inclusive environment for those students who are oftentimes sort of sheltered away, and sometimes out of necessity, maybe that's not the best term, in a self-contained classroom, okay? While I think that my son was embraced by others, I don't think there was necessarily that opportunity to really fully interact. And I think with improvements specifically to the new, not just improvements, but starting from ground zero within middle school. What I would like to see, and I don't know, maybe Dr. Dubrick, if you have an answer to this, for those students in the program that used to be called life skills at the middle school level, which I believe is now called Bridges, will those students still be housed at Davisville Middle School, or will they be moved to Wickford Middle School?
I want to be careful with my answer, just because in talking with Dr. Santa and all, and looking at programming for the future, I think when we're looking at the new Wickford Middle School, that program would go there at Wickford, not currently at Davisville. I believe that is what the planning is. We are planning for some specialized programs to be there. We still have, just like Inga was saying, 3 more stages of design that we have to be looking at within the building. And I know, we've had some correspondence about that. So there will be time where we need to be looking at the building and the design with more detail and a careful eye of placement of the program, where it is, as well as the accessibility for everyone. And you're correct, it's not just about checking off the boxes, it's making sure that if we're going to have a specialized program in a building, we really should be doing that any building, that we're creating it so they're being included in everything that's happening.
And I would also like to add, because I don't know if most of the people realize this, but when your children go to school, like for example, when my children were at Fishing Cove, okay? And again, this was like going back to when there was that transitional program at Quidnesset for like 4th and 5th grade. So it was a little bit different. But generally the students, they move together. This is what we were told when Michael was really young, that they try to keep everybody together so that you grow with your peers. What happens with the students in what used to be called the Next Steps program is that they would start off at Fishing Cove in the specialized preschool, and then at the time they went to Forest Park. That has now switched to Hamilton. So regardless of where that child is districted, if that child might have siblings going to Stony Lane or Quidnesset, but that child would go to Hamilton. Okay. Then what happens when they finish at Hamilton, those students transition to Wickford Middle School. And I say this with clarity and with a lot of sadness, because when my son was transitioning during COVID, the students were presented t-shirts. I think it said something like, Huskies forever, Wildcats next. And I had to inform his teacher that he wasn't going to Wickford Middle School, and he didn't need the t-shirt. And there were, I think, 3 of those students that fell in the category of going to Davisville Middle School. Well, we were more than happy to accommodate and go to where we needed to. There's a sadness there when those students are spending 5 years with their peers in one school, and now because of their disability, they have to go elsewhere. So that's why I think it is really crucial that if we're making those, not just modifications in new school, that those students transition to Wickford Middle School. So the Hamilton students go to Wickford. So that's really, and I don't want to put you on the spot, and as I said, I really want to support this. I don't have any more children in the school system. It's hard for me to get up here and speak. It's with a lot of sadness, but I do so because I know from my experience with our severely disabled students in the district, a lot of them come from families where the parents can't be here tonight. They may not have childcare. They may not even be aware that this is going on, but their child will be impacted. So I think, and again, I know you said you can't tell me for certain, but I want to really be able to trust that what's being presented tonight is accurate before I cast my ballot.
No, I understand that. I want to thank you for standing up and taking the time and having the courage to stand here and share all that for you and for the other families. One of the other things that we are looking at too is we're going to be putting together a redistricting committee. We're actually going to be talking about it at school committee tomorrow night, because we know that just looking at our elementary schools across the district, we have some schools that are at capacity and over. And unfortunately, in the summer, we then have to tell families they have to go to another school. So we are going to begin looking at that and making some short-term goals for next year, as well as long-term goals for the future. One of the things that we will be looking at very carefully are where our specialized programs are, to make sure that they're able to continue. Students that are in specialized programs at an elementary level can continue at a middle school level. We've also, in our project team conversations, also have been looking at numbers of enrollments, so that we, with a new middle school, looking at what schools would feed into it. Because currently, there are students that, even at Fishing Cove, some go to Davisville, some go to Wickford. So we want to make sure that for all of our students, and we know we want to be very considerate of our students with special needs, that build those relationships with their peers, that they do continue on to middle school. And that's what I'm saying. I'm comfortable, and Mr. Mezzanotte, just if you remember from the conversations, I do believe that the Bridges program would be at Wickford. Because of what you're saying, many of those students are at Hamilton now. And they can't go to Wickford right now because it's not handicap accessible. And that's one of the major problems we have with the building.
Yeah.
And so students that live in that area that have physical needs can't go to their home school because the building can't accommodate, it's not accessible for them, which is another reason of why we're proposing to build a new school. So that way it can be inclusive and accessible for everyone. And I think, another step too, just, looking at this is, when we go further with the design and looking at everything, is to also bring it to CLAC, right? So we have that representation and getting the feedback from others too.
And one other note too, I'm also a member of the DEI subcommittee, and I'm really trying to put on the front burner one of the priorities of accessibility. Accessibility and belonging, because they go hand in hand. So that would be another one, to feel free to reach out to.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Richard Welch, 8 Arrow Lane. Couple questions. ISDS, I don't see it on your layout. The septic system, where is it?
We do have our engineers, we can go to the site plan and just show you where that is. Would you kindly change to the site plan?
So the existing school is served by, we call it no WTS system, on-site wastewater treatment system. There's actually 2 leaching fields in the existing site. There's one to the east of the school and one to the west of the existing school. In the proposed condition, the new OWTS system will be within the outfield of the softball field.
So you're gonna replace a system that was put in, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, that we spent many thousands of dollars, you're just going to destroy that?
I believe it was installed in 2008, 2009. That's yeah.
A lot of money we spent over there, yep,
Yeah.
taxpayer money, yep.
It'll be about 20 years old by the time you replace it. The location of the leaching area to the west is within the footprint of the new building. And then the leaching area to the east will end up being part of the new field and stormwater management system.
You give any consideration to pumping down to the sewer line that's on, at Old Wickford Avenue?
There has been, yeah. We've discussed it with the town. It's about 2,500 feet away. To that point, it would require lift stations to get there. There is some elevation
downhill.
challenges. There's some elevation change there that we'll need to look at some lift stations, but we have been discussing that with the town. It's really a cost-benefit discussion, whether it's worth building that new infrastructure versus, and looking at not just the capital cost, but looking at the operation and the maintenance of a septic system, an OWTS system, or the public infrastructure in the roadway.
Town has not been good about IS or OWTS systems. This school is a prime example. The original septic pumper pumped the same chamber every year. There were 10 chambers. When we changed pumpers, we found out that the school had never pumped the other 9 and or the one for the stadium. So being on sewers may have a real cost benefit to the town. I was surprised to see that unlike this school and Wickford Middle, you're going with a two-story building. And I don't understand that because you've got a bigger footprint on a 2-story building than you would have on a 3-story building on a tight site.
No, just the slide.
Oh, okay, thank you. So for clarity, the entire building is not 2 stories, it's just the classroom wing. And that classroom wing, building it that way is very efficient because we are the same kind of structure that's going for 2 stories. The balance of the building, what we were describing as the main street or the heart of the building that has all those public spaces off of it, that's single story.
But the footprint for the classrooms is 2-story, where it would be smaller if it was 3-story. And it'd be more efficient to build the 3-story than the 2-story.
Well, I think that we find that it's actually more cost-effective to do the 2 stories as well as security recommendations are to keep the
You would be
buildings
the
lower.
first person in Rhode Island that would agree with that statement, because it's not true. Has RIDE approved this, this application?
It's in review.
So it has not been approved.
It has not been approved.
I take offense to the fact that you're having this bond go before the voters on something that has not been approved by RIDE. We go through all of this, and if RIDE decides that they're not going to approve it, for whatever reason, the people are gonna vote on it. You spend a lot of money to get here, doesn't make a lot of sense to me as a taxpayer. Last question I have for you, what is the design enrollment for this school?
.400 students, grades 6 through 8.
And what is it now? What is the Wickford now?
Kenny, today's enrollment,
So the enrollment at Wickford is under, but what we are, as I said earlier, we're looking at doing a redistricting, so we're looking at proposing more of a balance. So the building is proposed for 400 students, because we would also, in looking at redistricting, shifting some students that currently go to Davisville Middle School to Wickford, and we want to do that to offer more of a balance to the town. And also in looking at it, that Fishing Cove is not having a split with their population of some going to DMS and some going over to Wickford Middle School.
So you didn't answer the question. What is the design right now of Wickford Middle?
I don't have that right in front of me of the,
The enrollment for Wickford
no, the
Middle?
current capacity of Wickford Middle School.
The current capacity is,
We can get that for you, I just don't have those numbers in front of me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Andrew Begin, 77 Tower Hill Road. 2 kids in Fishing Cove, third on the way, so I'll be putting at least 3 through the Wickford Middle School. And first I want to say thank you for everybody who's worked on this to date, and the people who have, looked at it with a fine-tooth comb and challenged things. My question is pretty brief, is around technology. It was mentioned here briefly, but it's how much of the budget here is going into and when I say technology, I kind of mean more like the student experience, like classrooms and whatnot. And then if it's, how much of that is slated for the budget, and or when does, technology in classroom and stuff like that get decided? And maybe secondarily, I'll kind of, any of the answers to these questions are, I'm just interested in the topic a little bit. Is there a general principle for how we're approaching technology? Because I imagine it can be something like this or like that. And I'd like to just have an understanding of how we're thinking about technology and the student experience and whatnot.
are you talking about the Wickford Middle School or the?
I am talking about either, generally speaking, as we're going into schools. I'd like to understand both, but with middle school especially.
Yes, so actually I'm going to ask Inga to talk about the reimbursement from the state, but the technology, as Mark has been highlighting, we're in that early phase, but all integration of technology is going to be a part of everything that we discuss going forward.
Yeah.
And, we've always thought about, where's the teaching wall and what are the kinds of just support of all the infrastructure, the support that's needed for state-of-the-art technology.
Yeah. Cool, and my first time here, so thank you. I'll come to more in the future as it comes. I would just maybe put out my own, a 2 cents, if I may, for whenever this does get underway, is that as a father of young kids, I actually don't believe we need a ton. I think, wood blocks and pencils are just fine in many instances. And so, also as somebody who used to work in Boston in a fancy building with fancy webcams that never got turned on and fancy screens, if that is a big piece of, the budget, again, I'll be in future meetings and can voice my opinion on it. So.
Just add the educational side for you. So that is, some of the design that we'll be looking at, the instructional design, what are the types of equipment and supplies that we need. And, of course, we take a look at of having a careful balance, right, between using technology and not using technology. We don't want our students, sitting on, computers all day. We also don't want to invest in technology that's going to sit there and not get used. So, we were looking at what's necessary. Obviously, having LCD boards like this, students having Chromebooks, projectors, there may be a need for some web cameras. I mean, we saw through COVID what we had to do and make that shift. But it's important to have some equipment in there, right, that have web cameras, because there's a lot you can do with bringing people in from another state or another country of, speak as a guest speaker in a classroom, or having an example of using a web camera from one classroom to another in a district or another school, of doing some type of collaboration. But all of that would be considered through the next phases of looking at the instructional space of what is appropriate to have in that classroom.
Great.
In terms of RIDE in the state, there is an allowance of $3,000 per student for technology that's built into the budget in addition to the cost per square foot. So, and then also $2,100 for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, which is basically if you turn the building upside down, whatever falls, that's what we call the FF&E budget. That is $2,100 per student allowance as well. So if you're asking in terms of how much, there's certainly, it's a balance between too much or, just enough, but it is in the building.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Matt Schreiner, 29 Wake Fork. Thank you very much for the presentation. Most of my questions don't affect the general audience, but they affect me and my family personally. So I'll just point my house out really quick. It's this one right here. This isn't super accurate. This is all open to the sunset. I'm very behind a new school, but if you could just take a moment without taking up everyone else's time to just talk about the regrading, because right now there's a substantial dip off Tower Hill Road, and there's drainage. It's not sewer, but it's it's rainwater drainage here, and the pipe goes under my driveway. So when we get substantial rains, it pours over and floods my yard a little bit. So if you could speak to the regrading here, what these gates are, because I heard you say it was also for deliveries, and then if there's an accommodation for a small privacy fence, which would be pennies compared to the budget, because right now the current school keeps its lights on at night, and if this second story has its lights on, it's going to be just a little outrageous. So if anyone could speak to that, I'd be very thankful for all those questions.
Oh, I'm gonna ask our civil engineer to talk about that, but I will talk about the lights. We're required not to shed any light beyond our property line, so,
Nice.
as well as, I'm sure things like fencing or planting to screen neighbors. I'm sure we'll have more abutter meetings and that kind of thing as we move along, but I think Dave could speak maybe to that.
So we'll let that speak.
Sure.
Yeah, so for the drainage on site, we are going to be reducing the flows from the existing condition to the proposed, so there won't be any increase leaving the site. We do have an infiltration basin just to the right of the multi-use field where we'll be sending most of the stormwater runoff and any of the impervious. Primarily will be going to that basin and discharging further to the right of the screen there. And then the grading, we are coming up the hill a little bit there. There's maybe a 10-foot drop down to the property line. And we're gonna maintain that slope, but protect it, vegetate it, and make sure there's no runoff going down that way.
The slope on Tower Hill or the slope abutting my property?
The slope abutting your property.
Okay, so that's gonna stay like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. To some extent, I mean, everything will be pitched to a catch basin that'll be managed.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Ricky Thompson, good evening. First I want to thank you for doing this. I just have a couple questions, but I'll preface that with a comment that I do believe that Woodford Middle needs help, and I fully support that. My questions are questions that have come up during the building subcommittee. And the first one I'd like to ask about, in one of the subcommittees meetings, building subcommittee meetings, I think you had an engineer from PAR in twice, talking about, he did an investigation, basically a book investigation, to find out if there was a junkyard in front of Wickford Middle. And I will tell you, to this day, I'm still hearing from, lack of a better term, old timers say there was a junkyard there. So my question is, if you find that there's a junkyard there, and as the PAR engineer said, it's gonna cost a lot of money to remediate this if you find it during construction, how will you handle that?
So that's, you guys don't mind answering that. Go back to the, maybe just kind of review the.
I'll start if it's okay. So first of all, like a lot of money is, we did look at the site and there are contingencies for some of those items and unknowns. I can't speak to each dollar in detail in terms of what it is, but because I don't have it in front of me, but there was a lot of discussion in terms of the unknowns in the site, and we did put an allowance for unknowns. But a lot of money, we don't, that in industry standard, we put in allowances and contingencies that are in line with what we know in the industry. But he'll talk about the details.
Sure, so I can, my name's Dave Potter from PAR, civil engineer, and my team worked on the Phase 1 environmental site assessment that I think you're mentioning. And so what's done at this design phase, at this schematic design, is a desktop review of all available information at DEM. We talk to people who are knowledgeable about the site. We look at old aerial photography, and any of the, several other sources of data. There's information that's online, some that's more readily accessible than others. And we try to understand whether or not we see any environmental concerns. And so that was all summarized in a 600-plus report, the Phase 1 environmental site assessment. And on top of that, so that's typically done at this stage, at the schematic design phase. What they did, in an abundance of caution, was also did some testing on site. So we went out and we had a geotech program that was done. There were 3 borings completed on the site for geotech. At the same time, looking at the ability of the subgrade to support the building, but also looking to see if we found refuse or any evidence within the building footprint. Those are 3 borings. It's not the entire site, but it's what we typically do at this stage. And in addition to that, there were also more test bits done to actually collect soil samples and send them to a lab and test them. So I can tell you the geotech report in the area of the building, the 3 borings that were done, they found one layer of fill about 4 feet deep in one of the borings. The rest were basically glacial deposits, so naturally occurring glacial deposits. That's what they observed. And the other tests that were done that were sent out to the laboratory, they took those samples, they sent them out to the lab. The results came back with no hazardous materials. So that's beyond what the due diligence is typically done at this stage. In the next phases, if this passes bond and this goes to the next stage of design, there will be more geotech work done, not only for within the building footprint, but also within the stormwater management areas to understand groundwater, soil strata, to see what else is out there. And that'll allow you to align the work with what you find on site.
I did appreciate the gentleman from PAR that spoke before the building subcommittee. And because initially it was, well, you can't find anything, but it doesn't mean that there's not anything there, based on, again, for lack of a better term, the old timers remembering of this area. So then there was a talk about drilling 3 test bores.
Yeah.
And he specifically said, well, that's great, but if you don't hit the area with contamination, you can have a problem. And then what was settled upon, if I remember right, was 3 test pits.
Yeah.
I remember them being done. And I guess, if I can ask the question, how much is being set aside? If there is, I'm very familiar with, for example, Newport, and I'm sure you are also, the problems that they've had down there. And essentially, they're going out for another bond to cover some of this stuff. So how confident are we, and how much money, additional money, is being set aside if something is found? If I was gonna build a house and I thought maybe, there was some doubt there, I would wanna make sure that I did something beforehand. But if we start construction and we start finding things, how much money is set aside for it?
Well, let Inga talk about the funding.
So we can follow up with exact information. I don't have the estimate in front of me here, so I'm happy to dive into it, and we'll follow up along with the other few questions we have to follow up on. But we can't speak for Newport. We hope that we have a good team here that's not Newport. So, and we did talk about it an extent, and we'll give you the information.
Yeah, Dave will talk a little bit about Newport, but also these things, these next levels of investigation happen well before construction starts. It's not so.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into Newport.
Yeah.
I am familiar with the situation. Newport had a documented landfill on the site. They have one. The Phase 1 ESA said there were issues. That came out in the Phase 1 ESA. So it's a different situation, I think.
Well, my point is, okay, true, there was a landfill in that area, and I'm aware of that also.
Yeah.
But apparently they didn't have the money to clean it up. So again, they're going, I'm sure you're aware of this, they're looking for additional bonding for that money. So for me, I would want to stay away from doing that, and I would want to make sure what's there or not there beforehand. and I know it can't be, I shouldn't say I know it can't be 100%, but I would want to be really sure before we start any type of construction, because it's scary. My second question is that you just hear about these communities, and this was talked about just briefly, and I'm not looking for a lot of information, but I keep hearing on how these buildings, these construction projects are going over cost. How are we going to handle that if that does happen? And it just seems like history shows that it does happen. How will that be handled?
So, good point. We're always thinking about that. And one of the things that we always do is we develop alternate lists, because what we don't want to do is take something out of the project that would actually be, something positive and do that prematurely. So one of our sort of instruments for controlling that is having alternates, so that you always know that you can, you're staying within your budget, but if the conditions of estimating are positive, you don't lose that opportunity to have those pieces and elements and systems in your project.
So would it ever get to a point that, and let me exaggerate a little, that the project is halfway built and then it's like, we're not going to have enough money
here? Well, so when you set up the project and when you hire a construction manager, which will happen in the subsequent phase of this project, of these projects, but especially Wickford Middle School, and once the delivery method, the construction delivery method is set, so whether it's construction manager at risk or design build, or there's a whole bunch of things that go into it, and you set a contract, so there is a contract and estimates, and the reason why projects get estimated 3 or more times during the life of the design of the project is because there is a thing that's called the design contingency, and there's also allowances, there is CM contingencies, so all those contingencies, and oftentimes, people do ask, why do you have so much fluff in there? People they see it as additional cost. So you have your brick and mortar, basically what it costs to build a building. And then you add contingencies, and as the design goes further, the design contingency reduces, because we now know more. We have more details, we have more studies, we have more borings. Then we have other contingencies, including of owner contingencies that are kind of not owned by the construction manager, but they're on the owner side, that you can draw from for instances like coordination items, design issues, things that misbuys, or some things, for example, that something was on one drawing, wasn't on another. So there's an industry standard for those items. Everybody is a person, and we do build buildings by humans. So errors and omissions and such happens. And there are standard contingencies that are set across the industry for construction. There is a reason we build everywhere, right? And when the GMP, which is that guaranteed maximum price, is set, in the case of, say, construction manager or a design build approach, this is when the project is basically sort of guaranteed to be built at that cost. So that is at the time when the project is being bought out by bid and procured. I can go ahead and do a whole presentation on it. You'll be here till morning. That's what I do for a living. Of course, there's also a way to go and just put design the whole project, put it on the street, and then bid it out and get a hard cost. And then carry a contingency on the owner side, so you can do that as well. But when the project when contractors bid, when construction managers, when subcontractors bid on the job, and when we award them the job, they're pre-qualified and they are verified, and in the industry standard, we look all across the board. And with those contingencies in place, we hope that things don't happen like, you know, we don't have a crystal ball, right?
No, no, I
But
get it.
we do everything possible to mitigate that concern. It is a concern. It is a concern we cannot solve here. I cannot guarantee anything, but we have the professionals in place, and I don't want to brag about what owners, project managers do, but this is why our job is mandated sometimes, is to make sure that some of those overages don't happen, and the contingencies are everything on projects to maintain that bottom line. And if you're under, it's great.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is there was a comment, more than a comment, I guess I'll say, is that you have the new building money, and then you have the CIP money. And one of the reasons for combining the two was if there's overages, no, this is what was said, so, okay? If there's overages, it could come from the CIP money if the two bonds were combined. Oh, believe me, and if need be, I can find that, but this was a comment during the meeting that that was the reason for combining the two, so that you could draw money off of the CIP money for the school if needed, whereas if it was two separate bonds, you couldn't do that.
I was never part of this conversation. These are not combined bonds. This is a school program. We combine that because you can only go like once or twice to get RIDE's approval. And in terms of how you submit this, it doesn't matter what the bond is. Bond is financing. It's like the cash on hand. You know, the approval and the reimbursement, state takes allocations of funds very seriously. You know, there are instances when things do get moved around to an extent. Most of those instances are due to savings or due to some massaging of, like, say, small projects. However, in terms of a big major construction, once we submit the submission, and what gets approved, you have this thing called the MOA, which is a Memorandum of Agreement, which is between the state and the town. The town promises the state that they'll commit to this program. So you can't just take 10 million from the CIPs and put it into Wickford Middle. You will not get reimbursement.
Okay.
Or could even like get disqualified, not disqualified, but for example, the state can say, we will not reimburse on some things like soft costs or something like that. So there's definitely penalties and definitely ways that the state makes sure that this stuff doesn't happen.
And we have outlined exactly, you know, the funding, the 77 million that's going towards the new middle school, and then the 64 million for the capital improvement projects. And we have on our website the listing of what those capital improvement projects are and what those estimated costs are. And, you know, Inger is absolutely correct. When we've submitted our stage 2, we've outlined what those projects are for capital improvement projects, what those estimated costs are. We can't just go and say, hey, let's move money from the CIP over to the middle school. That's not allowable. And if we did, like, you have to go back to RIDE and have their approval. And they don't just grant that. That's not, you know, they frown upon you having to go back to your project and then say you're moving money around.
Okay.
So it's not an easy process either.
All right, I'm just going by what was said at one of the meetings, and I think that's about all. I'm just more concerned about overages and what's gonna happen, short and long term, especially when you pick up the paper and you're reading about this all the time, and I just don't want it to happen.
You're not the only one. We are too, and in every single meeting, do I sit on the other side of the camera saying we're watching that cost? So, we're watching that cost, because it's important that what we're putting forward, we're able to accomplish.
Thank you.
I have a question about net zero, and I know that we're shooting for an EUI of 25. Is that written into the contract? Is that a contractual number? And also I wondered if, Perkins, if you've done better than 25, and how you keep track of this as you go on. Because a lot of people are saying, how much are we going to save?
Yeah, right. I don't have, but we have, we're proud of it. We have a number of net zero schools that we build in the country. I don't know for sure if what the EUI has been, and as Inge is mentioning, it's, you know, and I think David, Mike had mentioned, it's required to come back a year later and make sure what we did on paper, the building and the site is actually performing as designed. But I'll find out and let you know.
And how do you check on this as you're building the school? Can you sort of speak to that a little?
Well,
That you're meeting the goal?
well, at every stage, we're looking at what the values are that we're giving to the envelope, and then that's being modeled by the mechanical engineer and looking to make sure that that aligns, and then, that does allow us to see what the predicted EUI is. And then, as Mark was just saying, at the end, so I'm going to call them audits. We're sort of doing an audit of the performance of the building as we go through these different phases that we've been discussing. And then another phase is after it's been completed, and it's looked at then too. But there's things that happen during construction, like what are called blow tests and things like that, where they seal up the building and they actually measure the infiltration. And if that infiltration rate is too great, then the contractor has to go back and figure out where the issues are, because infiltration is actually one of the biggest culprits of not allowing the building to perform the way it needs to perform. So those are the kinds of things. So that's a really great question. I actually appreciate every time you come to the meeting, you always have these really insightful questions on this. And we're really excited to be involved with this. And as Mark highlighted, Perkins Eastman in particular has done quite a few net zero energy buildings.
We were excited when we found the architects.
So thank you for...
And thank you for, because a lot of the questions I think that people have relate to guardrails. And how what we say we're gonna do, you can't just do willy-nilly or lead us someplace else or skimp. And so this has been a great meeting for hearing about that stuff.
Just to add, RIDE takes EUI very seriously in general, and everything that has to do with energy efficiency and life cycle cost analysis. Part of the 3 phases we have to submit to RIDE for design reviews, and life cycle cost analysis that calculates the energy model and the EUI and recalculates at every phase of our completion is part of that submission. I can say that I have personal experience where we submitted an EUI was slightly higher than we promised initially, and it was flagged and we had to explain it and we had to reduce it back and recalculate the building and take some measures that have to comply. So, there is many eyes on projects, and this is why we do what we do, and the engineers run and rerun the models. Then at the end of the project, there's also, and during the whole process, there's another engineering entity that's required, which is not here. It's the commissioning agent, the third-party commissioning. It's a third-party engineering firm that also evaluates with the engineer of record and reviews the energy model, and then reviews everything post-construction and during construction. So those practices, we ensure that gets what we design actually gets built, and we also check in between during construction and post.
Thank you. I know it's hard as a resident to ask, how much will we be saving? And based on numbers we have and what we're shooting for. Is that because the numbers aren't readily available, or maybe more in terms of past keeping track of energy costs and things? Why is this a hard number to be able to actually say, okay, this has been our cost, and this is what we hope it will be, and that will represent a 50% savings?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you're asking that question, because Mike at CMTA, Mike Pugh, has taken a look at that. He's used the estimated numbers that we've received, at this stage, this line in the sand, and then evaluated that in what's called a life cycle cost analysis, and he's looked at what are those first-time costs, and then looked at how those, what happens over the life of the equipment, because your operating costs with what we're proposing are going to be much lower than if you used a conventional gas-fired boiler system. And maybe I'll just have you comment a little bit more on that, Mike.
On the boiler.
Well, just also
Savings.
the savings. And then, I mean, there's one thing to highlight, which is you can sort of never get away from the electrical company. They will always charge you some kind of base fee. It's not related to that operating cost, but there is that, which Mike has also taken into account. You just summarize what it.
Yeah, so during this process, we looked at 3 different systems to have them priced and compare, with different levels of efficiency and everything. And then to what Tina said, we went through and did a life cycle cost analysis of those. And the most efficient is the highest first cost, but then it does quickly pay off and become the lower overall cost. So we do look at that. And also to what she said, or I think it was Inga, RIDE does have requirements for us, or for the project, for what the EUI needs to be, what they're looking for. So that's another reason for having the geothermal system, because that is, as far as factoring in all the building envelope and all the different costs, that is the best system to allow us to get there. If we used a less efficient mechanical system, then there has to be a much better building envelope or something to make up for it. So just with the overall cost of everything, that's what works out the best, is that geothermal system. So.
Good evening. My name is Dave Wren. I live at 21 Loop Drive. I want to say this is my first meeting I've attended on this proposed building, this facility. And I appreciate all of the information that's come forward. I appreciate the questions asked by the audience, especially the guardrail questions. I think that's important. I have a couple of questions. Just curious, the rehab of Woodford Middle School would have been a larger square footage by about 10%. And I see that the number of school children is 400 for each building. A couple of questions comes to mind. One is, what is the full capacity of the proposed new building? And how does that compare with the current Woodford Middle School?
Yeah.
So the capacity of the new building would be 400. That's what we are, so the new building would be at 400. That would be the capacity. We're not saying we're putting 400 students there, that's what the capacity would be. Yeah, I believe it's just under what the current building is. I don't remember the exact number for the current Woodford Middle. And then the capacity for Davis Middle School is close to 500. But we would be looking at doing a redistricting, because the current enrollment at Woodford Middle is just in the 200 range. No, I'm sorry, 300 range. 365. 365, yeah, I'm sorry. I was way off. I know, I'm saying that, I'm like, so 365 at currently right now.
I thought Ryan wanted room to wiggle and grow if a student population,
Right, and we are looking at with the redistricting of looking at the current population and of students and what schools, elementary school are feeders, and what schools they are going to.
Okay, and in the renovation of Woodford Middle, basically it seemed like the existing heating cooling system was going to be left intact, or was that going to be brought up to the same standards as the proposed facility?
Oh, could you, I didn't hear exactly what you said.
What kind of heating system would go into rehab?
To the rehab building. I noticed that was left out on the slide.
When the comparison was done to the existing Woodford Middle School as a renovation, that would have been a like-new renovation. So, yeah, the systems would have been changed.
It would have been upgraded.
Yes, they would have been upgraded.
The perk of the new system would have held true for both models.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
First of all, I had two kids who went through Wickford Middle School. They've approached the age of back when I was a kid, you know, don't trust anyone over that age. And they turned out really well. They've done well, and I thank the North Kingstown school system for that. And it's important that, you know, we have a good school system. And it's important that people make sure that we do. One quick question: if the bond is approved, what is the process in terms of moving forward? You have plans that were laid out enough so that you can get fairly accurate costing. How much tweaking is there allowed in this plan? I mean, we had a neighbor show up, which I thought was great, you know, to put on the map and say, you know, this is something we need to look at. You know, maybe it's the color of the brick, you know. Yellow is a nod to Wickford Middle School as it is. Red is a nod to the other historic brick buildings in the town. So what is that process looking like moving forward, and where does the public have input? And you know, how much sway is there?
I can speak a little bit to the design process. So it is exactly what you're talking about in terms of, you know, these are not final decisions, what we're showing right now, whether it's a red brick or a brick color that may be closer to the original Wickford. Those are things that we'll discuss. We'll also have, I would, you know, we talk about a schematic design. I think that's about 20% of the process where we're at. There's a lot of detail to come. There'll be extensive user group meetings. So we've had very high level meetings with curriculum people and with the district. We'll actually go and talk to all of the teachers. So usually that's pretty impactful. Not necessarily that you'd see wholesale changes, but we make sure that it really works for your community and for the, you know, for those teachers. So there's quite a bit that's still to come.
Ralph, can you talk about that? Will we have public meetings where people, or will it be a subcommittee looking at this moving forward?
So they'll, and again, I'll defer to the superintendent, but I can tell you that as co-chair of the building committee, you can be assured that a lot of all these discussions will be held in public. So as mentioned, there'll be a lot of public input as we're getting right now. I see a lot of people taking notes, so that'll all be in public atmosphere. In addition, my understanding is that all of the purchases will also be handled by the council, and so those bids will be a public meeting. So there'll be a lot of public input, and I appreciate you asking me that question, but I think I speak for the school committee, the council, the superintendent, the team here. There's going to be a lot of public input. As was just said, right now the design stage is at 20%, so there's still 80% of this design where we're going to be listening to people to hear what is important to them, what can be accomplished, what is cost efficient, what is important, and that's how things are done here, and I'm very comfortable with that.
And I'll just add, you know, when people come to the meetings and we're listening to the residents, you know, we really do listen to the feedback that we're receiving so that we can take some of those ideas and incorporate it into the design, into what we are doing. So all our building meetings are public. They're all advertised for the year. They're on our website. As we move forward with all these design phases, we'll be having the meetings. Every time that we do have to consult on different design, there might be different groups of people we need to bring in and ask for others to attend those meetings as well. But even just coming to the meetings and voicing, you know, concerns or ideas or at the public forum, you know, we do listen to that and take that into consideration. I know in the design, we wanted to make sure that this design fit into the architecture within Wickford and thinking about the village as well, as far even to the color of the building and the bricks that are being used.
I mean, just very quickly, because sometimes promises are important, but the proof is in the pudding. A lot of the things that you see here were as a result of public input.
Okay.
So,
did any students provide input? Was there an opportunity for high school students, who, you know, feet on the ground with their experiences in an educational facility?
So we will, and we have. So you know, we will be doing that. We have not had a student forum group yet to say specifically to that, but we will. We think it's important that we're hearing from our students as well, as far as, you know, what was your experience in middle school and what can be different and what went well.
I think that's important, and it's a learning moment for them, and it's who knows, they might come up
about student input. When this new school is built, will there be a screen showing how the energy, how much energy is being consumed based on, will there be like a rooftop lab for kids to?
I'm not sure about the rooftop lab, because actually the rooftop is full of photovoltaic panels and other equipment. But yes, we've definitely done that kind of thing where we have what we'll call a dashboard or an interactive screen, so you can check in real time on the energy consumption. And really, students, they're keenly aware of the environment. And they're better than us, I think, a lot of times in how aware they are about things like that.
Hopefully, they'll be more aware than we are.
Yes.
If that's all the questions for this evening, I want to thank everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. This meeting was recorded, so we will have this up on our website in the next 48 hours. We ask you to please keep staying involved in this process and attending our meetings. So thank you.